It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Putting the release of Israeli hostages on hold. The warning from Hamas as their ceasefire with Israel comes under the greatest pressure yet. There'd be no right of return for Palestinians to Gaza, says President Trump as he talks further about his plans and prepares to take tougher measures too over tariffs. In the next hour, he's expected to hit friends and foe alike with billions of dollars in extra costs over steel and aluminium, and the UK won't be immune. Also tonight, the on-camera crackdown on migrants illegally in the UK as the government tries to show it's getting tough over deportations. The tractors taking over the heart of political power as farmers send a message to ministers that their inheritance tax protests aren't going away.
It was a privilege to be a mom. I was so proud of her.
Speaking publicly for the first time, the parents of the young victims of the Southport attacks. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello there, good evening. The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is facing its biggest threat so far tonight. The Palestinian militant group says it is delaying the next release of Israeli hostages because of what it claims are systematic violations of the ceasefire. Israel's defence minister says that announcement is itself a violation. Well, up until Saturday, there had been a series of hostage releases by Hamas. In the most recent, 3 Israeli men who appeared emaciated after 16 months in captivity were freed. Israel, in return, freed 183 Palestinian prisoners. Well, Hamas didn't mention Donald Trump when justifying their pause in hostage releases, but the US president has weighed in further on the future of Gaza, saying in an interview excerpt that Palestinians would not have the right to return there under his plan. Well, let's get more on this developing story now from our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, who's in Jerusalem, and our US correspondent, Mark Stone, in Washington. So, Alistair, what have Hamas said and what are the reasons they've given?
Well, Hamas has given 3 main reasons for taking this position. Firstly, the delay in allowing Gazans to return to the north of Gaza. Secondly, they accuse the Israeli military of firing at Palestinians in Gaza. And thirdly, they say that not enough humanitarian aid is getting into the Gaza Strip, not enough under the terms of the ceasefire agreement. They released a statement. Part of the statement said this: over the past 3 weeks, that's the duration of the ceasefire so far, the resistance leadership has monitored the enemy's violations and failure to fulfill its obligations under the agreement. We reaffirm our commitment to the terms of the agreement as long as the occupation remains committed to them. It was already a very fragile ceasefire, a ceasefire in which we've seen some bumps in the road along the way that have been smoothed out by mediators, but this puts it at its most precarious moment so far. As you said, interestingly, they didn't reference Donald Trump's comments over the last few days about wanting to own Gaza. It could be that they're trying to take advantage of domestic political pressure inside Israel. Tonight in Tel Aviv, families of some of the hostages still being held in Gaza were rallying to put pressure on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government to ensure that a second phase of this ceasefire deal is agreed. Hamas don't believe that Israel is taking it seriously, and within the Israeli government there are some ministers that don't want a second phase to happen. They would like to see a return to the fighting. One final thing that Hamas did add in its statement: they have released this warning 5 days before the next hostage release, and they say that is giving Israel, America, and the mediators enough time to try and resolve the problems.
Setting a deadline, clearly. Alistair, live for us in Jerusalem, thank you. Well, let's head to Mark now in Washington as we talk there. Hamas not mentioning President Trump's increasingly strident statements about Gaza today, but he has gone even further in the latest details released. Tell us more.
Yes, a remarkable doubling down of his position on Gaza. He said yesterday on Air Force One that he would like to buy and own Gaza, a doubling down there. Quite who he is going to buy it off, he did not make clear. And then in a new excerpt from a Fox News interview, which he did yesterday, which is being released today, he doubled down yet again, saying that it was clear in his mind that Palestinians would not have the right to return. Many people will see this as him normalizing ethnic cleansing. Have a listen.
We'll build beautiful communities for the 1.9 million people. We'll build beautiful communities, safe communities. Could be 5, 6, could be 2, but we'll build safe communities a little bit away from where they are, where all of this danger is. In the meantime, I would own this. Think of it as a real estate development for the future. It would be a beautiful piece of land.
Would the Palestinians
no
have the
big
right
money
to return?
Spent. No, they wouldn't, because they're going to have much better housing, much better. In other words, I'm talking about building a permanent place for them. Because if they have to return now, it'll be years before you could ever. It's not habitable. It will be years before it could happen. I'm talking about starting to build, and I think I could make a deal with Jordan. I think I could make a deal with Egypt. You know, we give them billions and billions of dollars a year.
And those last few words there, I think, are telling indeed. The fact that he pointed out that he gives Jordan and Egypt billions of dollars a year, that the Americans give them a lot of money, that is his negotiation, because he is effectively saying to those two countries, and I'm sure he will say to King Abdullah of Jordan, who is here in Washington tomorrow, if you don't take in Gazans, take in Palestinians, then we will cut off your funding. So an almighty bind that these Middle Eastern countries are in, as they are facing another angle, another aspect of Donald Trump's transactional and deeply controversial opinions and ways of doing business and diplomacy.
And Mark, tonight we are awaiting another development in Donald Trump's presidency, the signing in of tariffs on aluminium and steel for friends and foe alike.
Yeah, this is a new executive order that was due to be signed a couple of hours ago. It's actually been delayed. It will happen, we think, in about the next 20 minutes. And it is tariffs. It is new tariffs, not tariffs designed to punish other countries, to get them to do something that they may not want to do, but instead tariffs to boost American business, as he would see it. 25% on all steel imports from wherever the steel comes. 25% on aluminium as well. Now, in his first presidency, he did put in place 25% tariffs on steel, 10% on aluminium, but then he granted exemptions for Mexico, for Canada, the two biggest importers of those two metals to the United States, and also to the European Union and to the UK. This time, the suggestion is he will not. And the impact on those countries who send steel in such vast quantities to the United States, Japan, Korea as well, the impact will be very large indeed.
More details, obviously, when that happens. Mark, thank you. Well, the country that stands most to lose from Donald Trump's tariff announcement on aluminium and steel is America's northern neighbour, Canada. But the UK will also be hit, though the industry is a shadow of what it once was. It still exported £2.5 billion worth of steel and iron products to America from 2022 to 2024. Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has this assessment of the impact.
It's another day. It's another set of tariffs from Donald Trump, this time steel and aluminum, as it's called in America. Let me just give you a bit of the potted history of aluminium production around the world, in particular in the US. This is showing you, going back to 1900, US aluminium production. What you can see is obviously that line has gone down, and other lines like Canada, they've gone up, partly because, you know, it takes a lot of hydropower to make clean aluminium, and there's a lot of hydro in Canada. But actually, the bigger picture here, we've got to zoom out for the bigger picture. And you see it when we add on the line for China. Look at this. I've got India there, and we've got China. extraordinary increase in Chinese production, bigger than anywhere else in the world, and that's really dominating production around the world. And actually, if you kind of take that story about aluminium, you can see that the US has become more and more dependent on imports. So imports of aluminium, they've gone up and up and up to the extent that that's been kind of around 50%, the measure of dependence on getting stuff from overseas. Whereas steel, look at this is steel, and dependence on imports for steel is much lower than for aluminium. So that's kind of an interesting dichotomy here. But when it comes to aluminium, it's mostly Canada that most of this aluminium is actually coming from. So it's not coming from China, even though far more is being produced in China. In the US, most of the aluminium comes from Canada, but then that Chinese aluminium has to go somewhere, and obviously beyond the Chinese market, it's going elsewhere and making it very difficult for aluminium producers to compete. And what are the things that aluminium is used for? Well, it's used in transportation. So you've got planes, you've got trains, you've got automobiles, particularly electric vehicles, anything that needs to be light. You've got containers and packaging, construction, electrical. The key point here, OK, is that when that aluminium becomes more expensive, which of course it does when tariffs are imposed, it means your cost of making everything from planes, indeed to containers, goes up. That's the concern economists have about this, because you're not able to create domestic production overnight. And worth saying, when it comes to steel production, it's basically the same story. Look at this. This is showing you how China completely dominates steel production around the world. The US still relatively low, though, like I showed, it's not necessarily as dependent when it comes to aluminium. And the UK, even though it's very low in terms of steel production compared with everyone else, we still do export quite a bit to the US, OK? So that is now in threat if those tariffs are going to be imposed on the UK as well. And that is quite a little bit, the third biggest export market for UK steel.
Now, governments, not gangs, should decide who can enter the country, the Home Secretary said today, as her department released footage of migrants being removed from the country for, it said, the first time. Between July the 5th and January the 31st, the latest Home Office figures show that nearly 19,000 failed asylum seekers, foreign criminals and other immigration offenders were removed from the UK. Immigration officers arrested 3,930 people in 5,424 raids, an increase of 38% on the previous 12 months. But migrants continue to arrive. Official figures also show that in just 5 months between the general election and December the 1st, more than 20,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats. Here's our political correspondent, Rob Powell.
Early morning in late January, footage released by the Home Office shows almost 50 people being loaded onto a government deportation flight. Half are foreign national offenders, and some who pose a higher risk have been restrained as they're led on board.
The rules really need to be respected and enforced for the asylum and immigration system to work. That's why since the election, we have been increasing returns, so 19,000 people who have no right to be in the UK have now been returned, and also increasing the illegal working raids and going after the employers who are exploiting migrant workers.
This is what those raids look like, with a record number of arrests now resulting from them, all aimed at discouraging illegal migration. But there's a political aim too.
Nigel Farage in the House.
Nigel Farage's Reform Party has been on the march in the polls and striking a hardline tone on immigration. And this is why the government is worried. Reform finished second in 98 constituencies in last year's general election. 90% of these were won by Labour, mainly seats in the party's traditional heartlands in the north and Wales. And they include Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner's seat, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper's seat, and Wolverhampton South East, held by Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden. Voters in that Midlands seat not yet impressed by Labour.
Still struggling to get it all sorted, ain't they? With this immigration thing they're trying to get in place. They still keep coming in.
Just very dissatisfied with the government and the opposition.
So there's more people voting for reform now. It needs to be sorted out, doesn't it? The country's in a mess.
It's that disillusionment the Home Office is trying to dispel by shouting about any successes they notch up.
Sources here say the increase in enforcement activity is partly down to staff being moved across from
from working on the old Tory government's Rwanda policy. But there still hasn't been any sustained drop in small boat arrivals, and trying to fight reform on their own turf carries risks too. This former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn says it's a doomed strategy.
Labour aren't going to out-reform reform. It isn't a vote-winning strategy. If you shift further and further into anti-migrant politics from the centre or the so-called centre-left, you don't reduce the salience of those issues, you drive them up. What they should be doing if they want to show that they're improving people's lives is actually improving people's lives.
Ministers will shoulder some internal criticism over this approach if it means hanging on to wavering voters. Eyes already on the next election and the political threats on the horizon. Rob Powell, Sky News in Westminster.
Well, our chief political correspondent John Craig is in Westminster for us. So MPs are voting on the government's immigration bill tonight. Right now, I think, John, they are very aware, aren't they, of how important this issue is to many voters.
Well, this is the bill, Anna. It runs to 66 pages, a big, weighty bill, the Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill. Now, during the course of the debate, which has finished at 10 o'clock, they've just defeated the Conservative amendment, which is wanting to put back some of the Tory laws that were passed before the general election. They're now voting on the second reading of the bill. But what we've seen during the course of this debate, tough talk from Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, as you might expect, but she faced pretty strong challenges from the left, from Diane Abbott on her own side, from Jeremy Corbyn, the former Labour leader, now an independent, of course. And yet, from the Conservatives, Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, called it a border surrender bill. So the bill now goes into committee. It is controversial. It's possible that there will be amendments in the Lords, not in the Commons, obviously, because of the big majority. But it's all part of a government fight back, a Labour fight back against Reform UK. We've seen it with those hard-hitting videos, tough talk on immigration and other issues that might appeal to Reform UK voters. And while the debate was going on tonight, up in the big committee room where the Parliamentary Labour Party were meeting, Labour MPs were being briefed by the party chair, Ellie Reeves, and the new General Secretary, Holly Ridley, on how to take the fight to Reform UK in the local elections coming up and beyond. So the Labour fight back against Reform UK is on, and this crackdown on immigration is very much part of it.
John, updating us there from Westminster. Thank you. Now, for months, the nation mourned the murders of Elsie Stankham, BB King and Alice Aguiar in Southport. Today, for the first time, we heard about the suffering of their families in their parents' own words. Elsie's mother, Jenny, spoke for the emotions of any parent when she said she would swap with her daughter any day. She speaks first in Greg Milam's report.
It was a privilege to be a mum. I was so proud of her. The effort that she put in everything, the love that she gave, not just us, her friends, her teachers, her nature, was so pure. She was fearless in a sense.
Oh, she was so brave.
Yeah.
She was really, really brave.
The parents of Elsie Stankham want the world to know about the daughter they knew, the daughter taken from them on that summer's day in Southport.
What goes through your head as Elsie's dad?
Guilt. Like anger. Like that's just something that I've got to deal with.
And there's lots that's gone over and said, oh, we should never have sent her. But she wanted to go so much. And I think we've spoke about it a lot, and we've said she was in the right place and where she wanted to be.
Yeah, Elsie and all the kids there had every right to be there and every right to feel safe.
But if we hadn't been there, it wouldn't have happened. I might not be here, but I would never have let that happen.
You'd fight to the death for your children, wouldn't you?
Yeah. 100%. God, I'd swap with Elsie any day.
Whether what happened could have been prevented is for a public inquiry they've welcomed. The hope it could spare another family. As for the prison sentence handed to Elsie's murderer,
it doesn't make us feel any better. If you're asking me, the number's massive, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't change how I feel. If he spends the rest of his life in jail, it doesn't bring back Elsie, does it?
B.B. King's family also want the world to see the girl they knew.
You know, she was a human being. She was a beautiful, funny, crazy, gorgeous girl, and her legacy, it can't be defined by what's happened. And I've got to make sure that people knew that she isn't defined by this. She was pure light. She was pure joy.
She was just so full of love, but we were just so close, and we'd do all kinds of things. We just normal things, but it was so precious, and we've got to hold on to those.
Well, we thought that whatever she did, she was going to move mountains. She literally was. And I really, really hope that this isn't all for nothing. Yeah. And in spirit, she can still have an impression on the world, and she can help just the future, protecting children.
The families agree that out of what happened to Elsie, BB and Alice Aguiar, some good must come.
We'll always be Elsie's mum and dad, and no one will ever take that away from us. And we've always said from the start that we won't let evil win this. So we have started, and it was quite early on, we started a charity called Elsie's Story. And we feel like it's our duty as her mum and dad to continue writing Elsie's story for her. It's given us purpose. It can't be in vain. I won't allow it. Whether that's through change in the public inquiry or whether that's making through Elsie's story. I always want to do her proud, don't we?
Greg Marlin reporting there on the parents' pain. Now, the man currently steering the Church of England told his flock today he has made mistakes, but that he will lead the change that the Church needs. Archbishop Stephen Cottrell was speaking after surviving a bid to stop him making his address at the Church's General Synod, effectively its Parliament. He's been accused of not acting quickly enough over a priest who was barred from being alone with children. Our communities correspondent Lisa Holland was there.
Gatherings of the Church of England are generally more staid affairs. Instead, the Church began its week-long General Synod, the meeting of the members of its ruling Parliament, shrouded in division and torment over the way it handles allegations of abuse following a string of scandals.
How do you feel the mood is going in today to this Synod? Oh, probably a bit anxious. Just because there's an awful lot that's really important, and it's important we get it right, so we don't want the moment to pass.
O God, make speed to save us.
Inside the Synod, the calm and comfort of prayer stood in contrast to an unexpected vote on whether the chamber would even hear the central address from the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell. Now the Church's most senior figure after the resignation in disgrace of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, Stephen Cottrell has himself faced calls to quit over his handling of alleged abuse cases.
And all of us, and I assure you, I begin with myself, must be subject to proper processes of accountability. I have long believed that greater independence is the missing piece in the safeguarding jigsaw, delivering the accountability and transparency we need, particularly in the area of scrutiny.
The Archbishop of York has said actions speak louder than words, but he is also facing questions from within the Church over whether he is the person to lead them through this crisis.
But there are fears the week could end without enough substantive change.
Nothing that I've seen so far is going to make a difference to victims and survivors of church abuse. So it's yet to be seen whether the General Synod can turn that kind of feeling of sadness and shock and sorrow into some kind of action.
On Tuesday, the Church will vote on new proposals for safeguarding, measures which may or may not send a message that it is ready for change. Lisa Holland, Sky News, Central London.
2 MPs have now been suspended by Labour over their part in a WhatsApp group containing offensive comments. Health Minister Andrew Gwynn was sacked at the weekend over leaked comments that he'd posted on that group chat. Burnley MP Oliver Ryan has also been suspended and has apologised wholeheartedly for reported comments in the same chat. Labour has launched an investigation into the group. The King was joined by the Prime Minister and his deputy in Cornwall today in a rare joint engagement. They were in Newquay to visit a housing project. Well, it's more than 3 months since the budget, and so far the government has shown no sign of backing down over its imposition of inheritance tax onto family farms. The farming community isn't giving up, though, rallying again at Westminster today. Our West of England correspondent Dan Whitehead was there too.
Back in town, bringing Westminster to a standstill. With inheritance tax firmly in the firing line, farmers from across the UK descended on Downing Street in their latest demonstration against plans they feel could destroy British farming.
Well, I have 3 sons coming through, and I'm just worried there's going to be nothing left at the end of it for them. The parts of the farm may have to be sold off to pay the tax.
We just want to feed the nation. We don't want to be millionaires. We just want to carry on farming and let our kids and the next generations do that.
Do you feel that there's a risk that you won't be able to be involved in your parents' farm?
Potentially, yeah. If this carries on, for sure.
And how do you feel about that?
It's scary. It's scary what the future holds.
150,000 signed a petition against the government's plans to introduce a 20% inheritance tax on farms worth over £1 million.
There have been 4 or 5 of these big farming protests over the last year. The government isn't budging, but the thing is, neither are they. And every time, it's a bit louder and a bit bigger.
The question is it enough?
We will continue, and every time we come back, and we will get bigger, and we're getting more united, and we will continue all the way along. We're at the beginning of a parliament. So I'm not going to be put off by the government still saying the lady's not returning.
There is talk of the threshold being increased to £10 million to help smaller farms, something government sources deny. They insist the current plans are fair and balanced. But Reform leader Nigel Farage and all opposition parties are making capital out of this issue.
These people are not going to stop. And if you understand that, then you recognise the government are the ones that are going to have to stop.
As Parliament debated the issue, farmers watched on in the rain. This is as much about where our food comes from as it is complicated tax arrangements. For Tom and son Bert, it's also about ensuring the next generation has a chance to farm.
That's the only reason me and my wife are carrying on with the farm and managing the debt and taking it on for the previous generation, is to try and secure the ownership of it, or keeping it there, for Bert and all the other cousins and all the other family members.
There is little more than a year till the controversial inheritance tax kicks in. You get the feeling this won't be the last time that farmers swap countryside for the city. Dan Whitehead, Sky News in Westminster.
And finally, after producing the biggest shock so far in this year's FA Cup, Plymouth Argyle will now have the chance to deliver another giant killing in the 5th round. They have been drawn against Manchester City. The draw for Plymouth follows their hard-fought win against Premier League leaders Liverpool yesterday. Their reward is the chance to pull off another cup shock at the Etihad Stadium when they face the defending league champions, and supporters say they are up for the challenge.
We are so up for this, and I think you're right that most English football fans always have a little support for the underdog, as Plymouth do when we see other teams playing. In fact, we noticed that Exeter, our rivals, are playing tomorrow against Nottingham Forest, so we're expecting them to win and set it up for a Devon derby in the final at Wembley. But we don't have What we would say is that we have a lot of friends across the country. We don't really make rivals, we just make friends, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of support for Plymouth on our journey.
Yes, get your tickets for that final now. That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we will take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview tonight, joined by the political editors of The Sun and The Guardian, Harry Cole and Pippa Crerar. Welcome and great to see both of you. Among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the eye, the headline for tomorrow's paper, UK fears steel industry faces a fatal blow. That and plenty more when we come back.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks. I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent. Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, a reminder of our top stories. Hamas has said it will delay the release of more hostages after accusing Israel of violating their ceasefire deal. President Trump has said he is prepared to take tougher measures over tariffs, imposing 25% on all steel and aluminium imports. And Labour has claimed it has deported 19,000 illegal migrants and foreign criminals since coming to power. Well, hello there, watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the political editors of The Sun and The Guardian, Harry Cole and Pippa Crerar. Welcome and lovely to see both of you. So as ever, let's check out those front pages. We're starting with the international edition of the Financial Times, which reports that American traders are rushing to buy copper, aluminium and steel in an attempt to stop their European counterparts from doing so before the Trump administration's planned tariffs kick in. The Eye focusing on what those tariffs might mean for an increasingly worried British steel industry. The Times, meanwhile, says Keir Starmer will avoid a war with the US by not joining in the EU retaliation against Donald Trump's steel tariffs. On her 100th day as Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch speaks to The Telegraph, insisting an electoral pact between the Tories and Reform would be off-putting for voters. The Express pictures 5-year-old Bert Church, who attended the farmers' protest against inheritance tax changes with his parents today in Westminster. The Metro leads with the anger of a woman who says she was spied on by a man in a sauna changing room after he was arrested but escaped with a caution. The Guardian claims an exclusive where they report that the assisted dying bill is to be changed to scrap the provision for a High Court judge to have the final say in each case. An expert panel will decide instead. The Daily Mail leads with new allegations about Prince Andrew's business dealings. The Sun lambasts historical remarks by the Health Minister Ashley Dalton, in which she apparently said it's possible for people to identify as llamas. And the Star believes we're all about to be wiped out by AI chatbots. Well, let's go home. Anyway, moving on. So Harry and Pippa are here with us. Steel tariffs. It is our anticipation that Donald Trump is signing those orders around now, just looking loads of drops. There's all different ones coming in right now. But in the meantime, the Eye relates it to the UK steel industry, Harry, and what concerns there might be and why.
Yeah, so there's, I wouldn't say hubris last week, but certainly some chuckling in sort of Whitehall and Westminster that it looked like that UK would be spared the sort of punishing tariffs that Donald Trump threatened on first Canada and then Mexico and then stood down at the last moment to cut a deal, delay it for a month, but has whacked on China. And the sort of idea that the special relationship post-Brexit means that we will be able to escape blanket tariffs on all imports into the United States, which I think so far we probably will. But these are very specific ones, which I think he's about to sign now.
Well, just the orders are coming in, just on one of them that he's done. Trump signs an order aimed at going back to plastic straws.
Okay,
just to say bamboo and metal ones are also available. You know, Sky put a lot of effort into, you know, an anti-plastics movement because it's so damaging for the oceans. But anyway.
Those small things that annoys a lot of people, right?
What? Yeah, no, paper straws are rubbish, but you can still get...
No, he means paper straws. Yeah.
Paper straws. Anyway.
I can imagine him sipping his Diet Coke, just getting very angry about it. If I ever win power again, I'm going to get
these things.
And he has the power to do it with the flick of a pen. That's the remarkable thing about executive power in the United States, is it is literally presidential decree. If you have to change so what their equivalent of primary legislation is, you can do a lot of things by unpicking what governments before you have done. Right, on steel, though, this could be really bad. Obviously, our steel industry is on its knees.
Oh, here we go. Sorry, I'm stopping you again. I do apologise.
We always come here for trouble.
Yeah, no, I'm so sorry. Right, here we go. So aluminium tariffs it's flicking so fast I can't click on it, actually, to be fair. Oh, my goodness me, what else is he saying? They raised from 10% to 25%. That's according to a White House official, reinstating 25% also on steel tariffs. So there you go. There is the moment. Do continue.
Well, we actually had an exemption, weirdly, on steel, which was negotiated through successive ends of the Tory government, starting with Liz Truss through to Rishi Sunak, actually. The UK was exempt from these tariffs because I think there is some sort of deal that we've done, which is a very specific type of steel that we produce the US defence market really needs. So there is still hope in Whitehall that we might be able to sidestep this. That's clearly diminishing tonight, or whether some sort of carve-out could come separately. We don't know the details, but as the Times are reporting, and as Pippa's been reporting for a week or two now, and I'll let her take over in a second, she's got the details, we're not going to get into a tit-for-tat trade war, which the EU have been threatening. And Peter Mandelson, in his first day as US ambassador today, obviously a former EU trade commissioner, has a big job on his hands.
Yes, Trump's trade advisor Navarro says tariffs are about ensuring the US never has to rely on foreign nationals, or nations rather, for critical industries like steel and aluminium. Trump's actions will end foreign dumping, boost domestic production and secure steel and aluminium industries as the backbone of US security, which is the argument that many have had in the UK about why we need a steel industry, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah. Well, no, just that it's been seen as tied in with national security, and the government has invested successive governments have invested a huge amount of energy and money, taxpayers' money, to keep the sector alive, not least because tens of thousands of people are employed and it generates hundreds of millions, if not billions of pounds every year, but it's seen as being a really important sector. This particular story in the Times is about retaliating with tariffs, that if Donald Trump decides that actually this isn't just a negotiating tactic, which it may have been seen to be with Canada and Mexico at least, threaten the worst and see what they come back with. But if it ends up being, if Britain ends up being caught up in his approach to European tariffs, focused on the EU, obviously, which we're no longer part, then there has been a discussion inside government about whether we should retaliate. And I interviewed David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, last week, who gave me a very strong signal that the UK's cross-party position is that we're an open free market society that doesn't believe in tariffs, crucially, he said, in either direction, which to me was a very clear signal that they don't think that that would be a good idea.
What proportion of our steel products go to America then? How hard would the industry be hit?
It's about 5% of steel and about 6% of aluminium, almost said aluminium, which of course
I know.
say it, which is in 2023. But there is a broader point about whether the UK, and actually I was speaking to some senior Tories about this last week, so it's not just the government, has the economic firepower to be able to retaliate to tariffs when you consider that our goods exports to the US account for less than 0.5% of US GDP.
Just reading also, Donald Trump has said on the tariffs, no exceptions or exemptions.
Well, there we go. There's Peter Mandelson's second day in the office trying to unpick that. But Pippa's right, though, is what, really with our steel industry, as totemic as it is, all countries need for energy, national security, the ability to produce warships and submarines themselves, and we are basically importing most of our steel as it is. Really, what difference would we make if we did slap on retaliatory tariffs? But it feels to me it's going to be another part of that sort of careful path that Starmer, to some degree successfully so far, has started to walk of, because we have Brexit, because we're no longer in the EU, we don't automatically have to sign up to everything that they agree on. Is there a different way that we can go through, including actually keeping our ear to China open as well?
And it's worth just quickly saying as well that, of course, Trump imposed steel tariffs on the UK in 2018 as part of the European Union. And when we left the European Union, we continued with those. And it was only until Joe Biden came in that those were lifted.
2022.
OK. Yeah. And just I haven't got the story up, but the Daily Telegraph reporting that Starmer will visit Trump this month for a tariff summit. So is this in order to plead our case? Is that the point?
Look, he's been itching. He's been sitting by the big red phone waiting for the invite for weeks now. Theresa May, don't forget, managed to make it out within 7 days of Donald Trump being elected. In 2017, when he took to the White House. Boris Johnson, I think, was the first visit to the Biden White House, or certainly the first European visit from memory. It was very early. Lots of warm words between Starmer and Trump, but so far no invite.
And we were told by Starmer that he wanted to, or by Downing Street, that he wanted to get out there within a month of the inauguration, which basically gives him 10 days yet. There's no trip planned yet. It could happen very last minute.
But it is Parliament.
Does it seem a bit desperate?
Oh, it's always needy. It's the special relationship, of course. Everyone says, the special relationship is great. We don't need it. But we're always there on tenterhooks. It was the first European phone call Starmer had. There was that weird thing on the plane the other day where Donald Trump started sort of saying, "Lovely, how wonderful and nice."
He's a winner, though, isn't he? He's won a big majority,
Starmer is, and
appeals to him.
The leaks we've got from the telephone calls sound like they have been warm on a personal level, but they are itching for what we might note is recess, Commons recess next week.
But
it's not up to the UK, though, is it?
Of course it's not as good.
So it might help.
It's a window between his proclamations and his
week of the
executive
24th, which Pippa and I are both down to do the Monday night at the paper review for.
We're not
might not be here.
We might have to do it from Washington, as we once did.
And in the meantime, tell us about your paper.
So at the same time as this great sort of tightrope that Starmer is trying to walk with the United States and the EU, obviously this government has been notably more pro-China, and we're revealing tomorrow tomorrow that they're about to get the green light for a massive North Sea development, wind farm development. Crucially, it's a Norwegian-Japanese project, but the wind turbines will be manufactured in China. Now, Desnes, run by Ed Miliband, not your normal sort of hawkish type, has warned that, yes, there is a small threat that China will be able to turn off these turbines should they be able to do that. There's a small threat of that, but crucially, the MOD have sounded the alarm on this, and they have said there's a real threat of eavesdropping because you put 300 turbines in the North Sea, you have no idea what's in them, no idea who's coming to maintain them, and despite that, we're hearing tonight that Rachel Reeves is about any day now going to rule that this investment's going to go ahead, despite these security concerns, putting her on another collision course with Donald Trump. Because don't forget, when Huawei were trying to build our telephone infrastructure, it was the Trump White House that literally made Boris Johnson completely U-turn on that and strip out all that Chinese infrastructure from our system.
And if that wasn't enough, Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, is coming to Britain on Thursday to meet David Lammy and potentially other cabinet ministers.
I wonder whether a little signing might be on the cards.
But then it's not all smooth sailing with them either, because tomorrow the planning inspectorate is going to be looking at the decision over the Chinese attempt to build a big new super embassy in East London. So there's a crucial decision there too. So big week for China-UK relations.
I wonder whether the embassy goes ahead and miraculously the massive Chinese investment in the North Sea goes ahead. And
yes, or hello Wang Yi, goodbye, Trump-Starmer visit.
But there's anyway, a lot of very, loath to use the term the deep state, but a lot of deep state people are very, very concerned about this project and have been trying to raise the alarm privately and miraculously are now raising the alarm.
God, it's all gone a bit interesting, hasn't it, don't you think? Let's talk about WhatsApp messages, shall we? And Labour, or when Labour knew. This is a story in The Guardian paper.
Yeah, so this is the story around the WhatsApp group, which over the weekend was revealed that Andrew Gwynn, the health minister, had made some really, crossing the line, vile messages in, which also led to the departure today, or the suspension today, of Oliver Ryan, who used to work for him as a councillor, is the Burnley MP. So it's the second Labour MP to be suspended. And we have, my colleagues at The Guardian, Josh Halliday, our Northern editor, has reported that Labour was warned more than a year ago about the existence of this WhatsApp group involving MPs, local councillors and a series of offensive messages. And he's also got some details of the 500,000 messages which were sent, which the Labour Party has been trawling through, amazed, frankly, that they've been able to come to a decision so quickly about Gwynn and Ryan, in which there's other examples. Gwynn described a constituent as and forgive me for saying this, these are his words, an illiterate retard, and a fellow councillor as a fat, middle-aged, useless thicket. He suggested that a senior Labour official, a year after the death of Prince Philip, was so old, so her go-to phrase was, "You're so old, you're like a young Prince Philip," and Gwynn then replied, "but less dead." So, more examples there.
Yeah.
The Labour Party knew about it for some time, so it will raise questions, obviously. I think you knew about it a year ago about why they didn't act sooner.
OK, and very quickly, you found out more stuff about the replacement to Mr
Yes,
Gwynn.
well, they've got rid of one minister who's obviously got some very interesting views, and so the new minister, Ashley Dalton, she was a semi-new MP. She was actually an MP at a by-election before then, has been around a little while. Tweeted in 2016 that it's OK to identify as a llama, which I think will surprise most people. She, we get it. I'm not going to read out the exact quotes as Pippa did, but she's got some fairly feature views on self-identification, trans issues, gender-neutral bathrooms, the male and female and trans anatomy, and. Well, as we say, Labour has stumbled into a fresh wokery row, which I think
comments a decade ago.
Yeah, but we're yet to hear the new public health minister, the woman now in charge of the nation's public health, who thinks that you can be a llama.
Coming up next. High Court judges will no longer need to sign off on the assisted dying bill. That's The Guardian. Back with that in just a moment.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
Raises many questions about many things.
Actually seeing people impacted, she was so upset.
It was powerful. They kind of couldn't believe they were being berated here.
Very much on my terms, I think was the subtext. News happens fast around Donald Trump.
It was a kind of wow moment.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It's Trump world, and we just live in it.
So, where next?
Follow Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Lough Neagh. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Well, you are watching the press preview. Welcome back to you. Welcome back to Harry, Colin, Pippa Crerar. Lots more lines from Donald Trump, so you're looking at them too. First of all, Trump is also looking at tariffs on cars, chips, microchips and the pharmaceutical industry. He will also do reciprocal tariffs over the next 2 days. So any nation that has tariffs on American goods, then they will have reciprocal tariffs. Also on Gaza, he has said if all the Gaza hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 p.m, I would say cancel the ceasefire. But then he goes on to say, let all hell break loose. And then he can carry on and say Israel can override it. Trump says he thinks Jordan will take refugees. This is the idea that the Palestinians should not be in Gaza. Anyway, he's now beginning to tackle this. First of all, they wouldn't let cameras in. Now they've let the pool camera in, and he likes to talk. But you know, that is the deadline thrown back at Hamas, certainly, Pippa, in terms of getting the hostages out after Hamas said it was pausing the hostage release because Israel had violated the ceasefire.
Yeah, and it seems to be, unfortunately, and perhaps predictably, very, very fragile. Everybody had questioned whether the ceasefire would continue. It requires so much on both sides. And as you say, the fact that, that this has happened, it does look like we're in a position that many people were predicting. Mediators had feared the breakdown of this ceasefire for some time, and as you say, talks have been postponed until we hear a clear indication from Washington what their intent is.
Yeah, I think you saw the emaciated and tortured faces of the 3 hostages that were released on Saturday, and well, if these are only three weeks down the list of people that are being released, if they're in that state, what are the actual state of the hostages?
Well, people have pointed out that the people of Gaza have struggled for food and many are hungry.
Yeah, I don't see very hungry-looking Hamas officers driving around in their Range Rovers.
Lots of civilians who are really in a terrible state.
Yeah, well, I mean that's not the fault of Israel. That's the fault of the hostages. The Hamas people who are seizing the trucks as they're coming across.
Well, actually, I think there are people that have blocked on the Israeli side some of the aid trucks going into Gaza, and so if you want to attribute blame, I think the people that are innocents in this are the civilians.
I agree with you on that, but there's also the other innocents in this are the hostages that are now still related. We don't even know they're still alive, and I think that's the thing. There's a big suspicion. There's a big backlash in Israel at the state of the hostages that were released on Saturday. If those are, as I was saying, if those are the ones that are very high up the list to be released, do we really know what state the ones that are still yet to be released in that? And is this a bit of game playing by Hamas? Because actually they're about to have to admit that a number of hostages may no longer be alive, and the ones that are alive are in a very, very poor state. And I think that's the real concern. And that's why I think once again you're seeing the White House play hardball in the way that they did just shortly before President Trump was sworn in, when he basically got the ceasefire into position by saying, if you don't do it by the time I'm in the White House, then, again, all these...
The squeeze is on again.
The squeeze is on again, exactly. Yeah.
We need to get to the weather. Thank you for now. Luckily, you're back a little bit later. Thank you very much indeed. Just very quickly then, on the weather, it will feel chilly this week. Limited sunshine, cold easterly wind, a cold, rather murky start tomorrow then. Any frost largely restricted to the brighter parts of the northwest. Expect a scattering of wintry showers, mainly in the east. The morning looks mostly grey again. Showers over eastern parts of both Britain and Ireland becoming increasingly isolated. The west of Ireland and far northwest of Scotland look like having the best chance of some sunny breaks. Press Preview continues after this.